Yeah, let's get started again. So did you find a solution for this one? Let's see. Yeah, so this is a fortress. It's the h6 pawn has gone too far, yeah. So if we could play this move, then it would be a win for white. And also, black is not able to get the king to g6 in this position. This diagonal is simply too long, and can also easily get into a position where the king is in the right corner. So this is a fortress. Yeah. So let's move on. So this one looks the same. Like the pawn has gone a little bit too far. So it's not so easy for white to, let's say, get the king forward, and then we can certainly check. So, but there is a win for white anyway. Yeah. So exactly. So g7. And then if king h7, you cannot promote right away. You're absolutely right, because then the king runs. So you have to prepare it with rook f7, absolutely right. And I could try to play something like this. And then I could try to hide, but this is basically, as long as the king cannot run out, you're absolutely right, then it's winning for white. That's why you played rook f7. Yeah, we've already seen that. So let's move on. Totally got it. So this one here is interesting. It's a white to move. Why is it winning? This is a position from Shirov's Fire on Board, the first one. And here Shirov talks about bishop c4 being quite an easy draw. And instead, king c4 happened in the game, and white won by trapping that bishop on b3. It couldn't come out. So, but if you take the position from the beginning, bishop c4, king c4, doesn't matter. Why is this winning for white? Yeah, great. So, so that's exactly the one. That's the idea. So let's see. So this is the move that Shirov didn't like. It was played in the game. And now the black bishop is not able to get out. Something like this. And then rook to the d file is preparation to put black in Zugzwang. So every time black tries to move a pawn, let's say, we always have something like this that wins the pawn. So black will end up in Zugzwang. So after king b1, the rook d1 controls the d8 rook controls the d1 square. So that was how the game ended. So, and Shirov then criticized king c4 with two question marks and suggested that bishop c4 was quite an easy win. And this is his analysis, check, and trying to get the king around. And now, but white is going into this sharp position where black suddenly gets counterplay against b2. And this is the position we had before. One of the first positions we discussed, and this is a draw because black is active. So what we are trying to do with white instead, and that's exactly what you mentioned, is we're trying to get to a standstill here. So in this position, rook f8, for instance, and then rook f4. And then you're absolutely right, 3 versus 3. So this is a good try for fortress, but this is another proof that there are no 3 versus 3. That is a fortress. Now, getting the king to b6 behind the pawn is the way to go. So standstill, there's no black cannot get in and attack b2. And now we just try to gradually improve our position. So this is the analysis I have in The Secret Life of Bad Bishops. So check and move forward. And then there is no king d5 now because of rook d1 that wins the bishop. So cut off on the 5th rank, trying to get around. Black defends, but black will be in Zugzwang and will have to let the white king in. And at this time, it's time for white to take some action. So having the rook on the 3rd rank is very useful. In just a moment. So we can play c4 here. And if king takes c4, we have a standstill like this, which is obviously winning for white. There's no counterplay against b2. So black could try something like this, but this is also going to lose. Yeah, so in the end, getting the king to b6 and is the way to get to black's weaknesses. So this is a winning position for white. Okay. So what about this one? So there might be a slower way to win, but white can win with a very good idea here. Yeah, the dance of the rook. So we had that a little bit last week with intermediate check. So right now we're not threatening checkmate on the bottom because of bishop g8. So so let's say we want to go to d7, but we want to disturb black first, so check and then rook d7. We're threatening checkmate and we are blocking this check. So now we have time to move the pawn. And now we do the same. So there's no check on the long diagonal. Yeah. And here we just need to get it right because there's some stalemate tricks here. Yeah. So this is again the same dance, and we win the bishop. So let's see. Black to move and win. So we have a standstill on the board. It's just, yeah. So that's actually what happened in the game. b5 and then b6 and then putting white in Zugzwang. If black can win that e6 pawn, then that will give black more freedom. So white could move that bishop to, let's say, d3 to try to keep the black rook out of this pawn. But then with this pawn on e6 gone, then it's easy for black to keep improving the position. So white tries his luck. Yeah, e7, rook e1, that's correct. Then we win that pawn. So bishop f c4 here. How does black win now? See, rook d1. That probably works too, because white is still in that standstill. So you're probably right about this. So let's see this line. He actually took here in the game. And then king g3. And now he's allowing white to promote. And then there's simply a checkmate. Mm-hmm. Rook goes out, could be rook a2 as well. Yeah. And then here we have a mate in 2. So I resigned a couple of moves before this happened, but b5 and then b6. It was a nice way to put white into Zugzwang. So this was a typical standstill position where black just had to find the breakthrough. And that was, b5 was very convincing. Okay. So let's move on. So, rook e1. And then with the idea of trying to target that b7 pawn. So what would you play here with black? Yep, push the pawns. Actually, black did not in the game move the king back. So black reckoned that he could simply let white take this pawn because his pawns are faster. So he just pushed the pawns. Let's see. Because white is just too slow here. Now white here, he got b7, but that's still not a passed pawn. So if white is going to have any chance in this game, he has to go for the c6 pawn. So to get at least some counterplay with that c5 pawn. But here black played. And now he played d4. So pushing the pawns right away is not so easy, let's say. Oh. Because white can defend, and then we suddenly have some counterplay going. But black played d4 here. And then suddenly he either gets access to the square with the bishop, or we get a third passed pawn. So white simply resigned. Yeah, so this was resigned. So the point was that black is simply faster. So even though white does get some counterplay against the b7 and c6, black is simply faster. So we don't have to worry about defense. We can actually just go for our own attack. Okay. Now we're getting to one of my favorite positions in rook versus bishop. So let's start a little bit earlier. So the position started from this position, and it's black to move. And here, black played the brilliant move g5. So this position is simply about trying to coordinate king, bishop, pawn, or king, rook, pawn. So there will be potential passed pawns or passed pawns, passed pawn on the board, and then it's simply about, so both the bishop and rook can stop and support the passed pawns. So it's simply about who has the more active king or who can coordinate the few pieces in a better way. So let's see. So this is still not winning for black. I think king e3, and then white can quite easily draw this game. White was playing for a win in the game. That's why he lost. He missed black's winning idea. So we can get to a position like this, but white is okay here. There shouldn't be any problem for. Okay, so this was Botvinnik's analysis, but white should be okay if white is just settling for less and plays the king back to defend the queen side. So let's see, king e3 is a safe choice for white. But white plays king f5 to try to bring black in a Zugzwang position, a standstill, where let's say if the black king has to move, then white will maybe get access to the e5 square. And then we can slowly push black back and then improve our position and try to win. So that's white's idea. So let's see what happens if king takes here. Then black can push that pawn. And let's say the rook goes here, then the king moves forward and at the same time keeps the white king out. So this is an example of the difference in coordination. So black's bishop is an absolute monster. It's actually covering the promotion square and supporting the own pawns. Then we have a passed pawn here and we have a king. So black has a perfect coordination between a few pieces. Actually, this pawn is helping too by defending that bishop. So, and the white king is out of play. The pawn on g4 is under control. And now black can simply go ahead and win the white rook. So this is an example of great coordination. Superior coordination, even though white has the rook and black has the bishop. So after taking here, white can play rook e3 to try to prevent king e5. But then black can get to the d4 square. And white can try to bring the king in. But now we get to the c3 square. And so here, black has a nice winning idea to win this game. That's very nice. King b2, king d2, and then bishop e4. So we're stopping the pawn here. We're protecting our own pawn. And there's nothing white can do against this c pawn, simply moving forward to c3. So again, this is a great example of better coordination, although white has the stronger pieces. So suddenly this double pawn came into good use. So the next three moves, white can do nothing. Okay, so taking on g5 loses. King f5 is also a mistake. So a4, and then king f6. White is waiting. b4, king f5. So white thinks he has a standstill position, but this is not a standstill. So what is the winning idea? Yeah, a3 and then c4. Let's see what happens. Let's see, a3, and so the bishop is pinned on d5. So if you play c4, I take with the bishop, the pawn. Then my rook is still defending along the third rank. So the winning idea is bishop takes b3, and then using the pawn majority after that to play a3 and then c4. But for that, we need to get the king out of the way. And so this is an interesting part of, I think Botvinnik analyzed this one. No, it was Auerbach who analyzed it in his book. And he analyzes king e7. And then king takes g5. And here I can notice that if white is settling for a draw, you can still play king e5 and try to get the king back. This is okay for white. So this is the analysis. And here's the bishop sacrifice that white can do nothing about this idea of c4 now. So let's say king tries to come back, then c4. And it could be a race, something like this, where black is simply winning. Okay, but here's an interesting part. in Auerbach's analysis, and it's still the cooperation of the few pieces. So black has no need to go back here. So it's like he's trying to do the same job, protecting G8 with two pieces. Yeah, so let's see that again. If you play A3, I'm not going to take on G5. I will maybe try to do the same thing with waiting, because I have a pin on your bishop and I'm trying to get to the E5 square. I think the idea still works, because what I suggest, so this might still work. You just need to get the king out of the way. King C7, yeah, that's the idea. So so that's the idea I want to show. This is Auerbach's move, but the king is not needed there because the bishop already protects the G8 square. And if white sacrifices on the bishop, then we will promote first. So this is like two pieces doing the same job. So king C7 is actually winning. And the idea is simply to, the king belongs over here, supporting the pawns. So let's say if king takes, then we have the same idea of taking an A3. And in that line, it didn't really matter if the king was there. So let's see if king C7. Now if white tries to get back with king E5, then we have a clear plan for moving forward with the king. And there's nothing better for white to, once king B5 happens, then we can think about playing C4. So, and if white tries something like this is just a losing endgame with the pawn up. So king had to go to C7 instead of E7. And I do believe that if you play A3 first, well, this is a little bit slower. And now the bishop takes B3 idea doesn't work. This might not be so clear, actually. So let's see, I wait and you go king C7. And let's say I take on D5 and you play C4. It does take a while before you move your pawn forwards here. So I'm not entirely sure about this one. Oh, bishop A2. And the rook takes. Let's see. Are you fast enough? So king C4, I guess, to control the B3 square. Mm-hmm. So king E3, B3 takes B2. Looks very interesting. What if I play this first? With the idea that, or maybe E4 here, that takes C3 with check. So now my king is at least in the range of the C pawn, and then maybe I can, let's see, you could try to move forward, but then I can maybe play something like this. This looks okay for white, because I have maybe, if you try something, and then B3, and then I have a check here. So I might, so A2 now. Okay, take. And then B3, I guess. I can play this now, because I take C3 with check. So something like this, and the white king was just in time to get back. So, oh, this is very complicated. But I think the moment black plays A3, so that winning idea of bishop takes B3 is definitely a clear winning idea. I think it's the only one. After A3, it's black has to prepare more to break through. So So let's just see what happened in the game. Then happened something like this. We already saw this. Okay. And then black was winning. So, but what I really like about this game that there was several lines where black's superior coordination of king, bishop, and pawn. So even though there was bishop versus rook, then black was able to coordinate the pieces better. Then I also like the point of king c7 versus king e7, and how strong that bishop was on d5, controlling promotion square and used in the attack the other way as well. So g5 was just a brilliant move in this position. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so white to move and win. Yeah, it's a hard one. So the bishop is restricted, has to stop that pawn. In order to stop that passed pawn, we need to get our king, try to get our king in front of the pawn. So the first move is king c2. And the big point here is that if f2 happens, we can take the bishop. And then if you promote to a queen, then white is simply a rook up. So black will run out of checks. The rook is defended, so there are no tricks. So, and you cannot defend that bishop. Even if you could, I would take it because I promote with check. So f2 is met with that check. So f2 is prevented for now. Then if king e2, we can go to the first rank. And now we can get our rook back to the 6th rank. So this was a position from an Alekhine game. And then I analyzed a line, and then I got to this position, and then I made a study out of it, let's say. So, so now black has to do something, push the pawn. Then we can give this check to force the king in front of the pawn, and then take g6. And here comes a nice point after king g2. What should white play here? Yeah, that's a trap, because rook takes g3 is only a draw, because you can promote, and then I take h3. And then because it's an f2 pawn, I have these stalemate tricks, and the white king is just not close enough for us to be able to checkmate the black king. And there's no way the white king can control f1. So this is actually a theoretical draw. So that's a nice little point. So how do we win then? Yeah, we have to go for bishop versus 2 pawns. Exactly. Take the pawn, and we have 2 pawns. So if king takes h3, obviously we can just take the pawn. So bishop e5, let's say. Black doesn't really have any good moves. He's trying to stay with the king as close. So f1, the king gets further away to chase the pawns down. But now we are in time to, and here black is lacking 1 tempo. Now we can just promote one of the pawns and promote the other one as well, and then win the game. So white was just in time to win the game there. So so that was again one of those crazy pawn races that becomes extremely sharp. Yeah. So so I wanted to end with this puzzle. So that's all for today. And I hope you enjoyed these promo classes. So yeah, bye. Take care.